Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. The Saint of War, Tensura x DxD, by Kischur Chapter 15. It has been a year since CL's appointment and new position as Heaven's new Jesus Christ has been solided, with said news going to all corners of the supernatural world, and safe to say, tensions for the possible war to happen any time now has risen thanks to this piece of news. Small fights in the borders has risen, with it essentially becoming a war zone, battleground if viewed by does that lived in the normal human world, but to does that have lived in the supernatural world. This sort of fighting was simply a small conflicts that doesn't get a mention in the eyes of the truly powerful. It was, simply put, a desperate attempt of trying to weaken heaven itself, with said faction rapidly growing in both number and power since the rise of Seal Tempest in his new position. Many things has rapidly changed in the faction. With the return of God in the helm of heaven, Seal was granted full authority and autonomy in the church itself, and with this command being directly made by God himself and his own position to account for it. He was essentially granted the authority to do whatever he wanted in the church, and with most followers of the church, that being the exorcist, nuns, priests and the likes being extremely religious and receiving the order itself from God himself, most accepted him as their new leader. The old rulers of the church, however, was different. They felt robbed and cheated of the positions that they have worked themselves to death to acquire, but none of them voiced out their complaints since, after all, the one that specifically appointed Seal was God himself, and with his new position as the new Son of the Trinity has also been established, his authority, even without the church position, would still have been absolutely simply because of the followers all following his lead and orders. Of course Seal himself knew of this jealousy and rage, but didn't do anything to it, simply because there are more pressing matters, which is readying themselves for the upcoming war itself. With God now taking majority of the administrative task out of the Archangel's hands, they were now able to get into their own personal training cabins that Raphael specifically built for themselves and then undergone hardcore training, and ever since the start of the training they haven't left the training cabin and has just been training 24/7. Because of this, God has also decided to give additional work to Seal, and that is mostly between the trio of archangels of Michael, Gabriel and Raphael, simply because of his own experience and skill set perfectly matching them. With Michael being the Grand Marshal of Heaven's armies, Seal now has given training schedules for the angels itself, while still following Michael's own strategies themselves so that no confusion is made between his and Michael's commands. For Gabriel, it is by far the easiest, with him having connections with the Norse, Pendragon, Hindu and Shinto pantheon, so it was easy to negotiate with them for trade and the likes as well, and even acquire specialized equipment or ores as well. As for Raphael's, hers was more in line with research itself, which he just decided to focus on the upgrades and making the already created technologies to be more advanced and efficient in their creation is. But other than those, Seal has completely overhauled the military structure of the church itself, since after all, the church is right now completely under his wing and subordination itself, allowing him to control it and manage it as however he pleased. He disbanded the core system itself and formed them into a single large army, with it numbering almost 1 million strong all put together, with the highest number being the ordinary infantry, as that have received supernatural training, but aren't cut out for being an exorcist, with them being armed with light weaponry like handguns, rifles and the likes. The nuns that followed the supernatural side of the church was also repurposed, because of their own immense faith to the Bible and to that of God of the Bible. They were able to easily use a higher form of holy magic compared to the rest of the church, and that is the miracle levels of holy magic compared to the average or even some of the higher ranking exorcist in the church itself. And so, Seal made use of it and gathered this nuns to form a new order called the Sisters of Battle, with them being more focused on the usage and training of the use of holy magic, to the point that Seal even went to their building and personally teaching them how to use holy energy effectively and the various usage potential it held. Because of that, most of the Sisters of Battle are more so mages, fully focused on utilizing their gifts and abilities to the fullest. Of course there are also some that are swordsmen or gunslingers in the mixed as well, and with them being led by a personally trained exorcist of Seal Tempest, also caused them to become one of the biggest powerhouse in the church and in the supernatural world as a whole because of their coordination and extreme firepower. After that, Seal then dismantled the old ways of the church, with its exorcist and the likes, with it being dismantled entirely by a new ranking called the Holy Knights, Crusaders and the Saints. Of course, The rank of exorcist is still a thing in the church, but it is seen as the second lowest position in the church itself, with them only being allowed to use light weaponry and the likes because of their lack of skills and experience, with only the best of the exorcist could become holy knights. To become holy knights, one would need many requirements. One of them is to evolve from a normal human and become an enlightened stage human, have master-class skill level in the use of holy energy, swordsmanship, guns, magician, have completed the Holy Knight's entrance, mid and final exams to be accepted into the ranks of Holy Knights, which would allow them to wear some of the strongest holy armor in the world has created and finally be allowed to use holy weaponry. The stage higher than that is the Crusaders. It is a stage in where the Holy Knight must achieve mid-tier ultimate class to have the qualifications to have the chances of entering exams, and even then, one must also pass various trials called the Trials of Fire, which is a two-part trial system that would make the candidate to experience some of the bloodiest battles and wars that Seal could make and mentally break down the candidate itself. If they couldn't repair their mentality, then their rank shall be demoted to exorcist class instead because of the amount of trauma that they could have acquired thanks to the simulation, but when they do regain their will and mentality, and get over it, they would straight away acquire the Crusader rank. After that would be the Saints, with the only requirement so far as to be a saint stage human or superclass entity itself, with the people of this rank having the most say in the church itself, especially in war times, with the current number of saints being 3, with 5 being potential candidates for the position of saint if they given enough time to grow. And so right now, the 3 current saints, does being Seal Tempest, Byleth Dulac, Alexander Anderson, were right now in their own meeting place to discuss the different portion of the army that they have in command. Seal, the upgraded cabins that you have built are a massive boon. I can only hope that there are more created in the latter years before the war. I will try to increase the production rate of the cabins, but I can't guarantee it since we have other things we need to create as well and not just cabins. The cabins or training simulation cabins are the newest technology that Raphael created in the hopes that it would provide some advantages in training their troops itself, like greater quality of soldiers and the likes. Seal and Yahweh who saw this very much also helped it flourished, with Yahweh expending most of his power to restart some of the resource mining that heaven has stopped because of him no longer being a part of heaven itself. The reason for this is because of the state of heaven in him creating it, since unlike most realms, heaven itself isn't complete, or more like it is in a perpetual state of incompleteness. The reason for this is for the reason of further expansion itself. Because of how small it is compared to some of the bigger realms of Earth, it is far more easier to maintain and manipulate, and with it being in a continuous state of incompleteness, Yahweh is able to completely manipulate it by using his own power and as of faith to continuously create more and more resources for production, and with most of humanity following his faith, it allows him to create infinite resource at will. While Yahweh did that, Seal on the other hand created a few variants of the cabin itself, with the first being the low-class cabins, suitable for people that are below high-class entities. This is also the type of cabins that could easily be mass-produced as well, causing it to be the most numerous in terms of number. Because of the high number of soldiers that are high class, and with most of them being infantrymen itself, this form of cabins are also very large, allow whole men that numbered in tens of thousands to go inside and train together as an effective fighting troop itself, with the commanders of each team using this feature the most, wanting to raise the camaraderie of each troop itself. Then there are higher tiers of cabins, with the higher ones of course being specifically made and placed into secure places so that no one would be able to copy the technology of this level easily, simply because of the amount of advantages it grants for training for the especially powerful itself. It's why this type of cabins are placed into the inner circle of the territory itself, with them easily being secured. Then there are also cabins higher than this, with this set of cabins being set and placed in heaven itself only, with them being highly valued, with the only ones that could enter said cabins are those that have reached the superclass itself, which has made it into an exclusive club of sorts, with the current ones that could enter those cabins being the Blade Incarnation Seal Tempest, the Ashen Demon Byleth Dulac, the legendary vampire hunter Alexander Anderson, the strongest angel in heaven Gabriel Tempest, the leader and the Alpha and Omega Yahweh, God. Also, the average powers of the infantrymen have also increased as well for quite a bit, with about a few thousand of them being qualified for the exorcist rank as well. So should we allow them to rank up? Alexander asked, since right now they are in a delicate balance of sorts. Because of the low average abilities of a normal human without any supernatural connections, Alexander, who manages the training of the lower-ranked members, like does of infantry and exorcist class, he decided to just increase their weapon skills, strategy and teamwork, but now, that some of them have the possibility of leaving behind their rank, there is a chance for their own team work to falter a little as well because of the missing member. It's why he decided to halt the ascension ceremony for now and ask Seal on what he thinks of this. Since he is now the official head of the church itself, it is his responsibility and command on what to do in this situation. Seal, who heard it, didn't thought much of it and just answered, "Let them rank up. Since if we don't allow them to rank up despite having the qualifications, it would create quite the unrest in the lower rankings. Besides, this would help them to grow as well, with them hopefully acquiring the skills to be able to skillfully team up with others as well. But more than that, we must also increase our higher-ups as well in this war as well after all." To this Alexander nodded, just getting the files ready for their ascension. "Our war strategy for the first step is to not attack, but to defend our borders. It is something that we could easily do with our terrain advantages and the likes, and with our excessive resources and supplies we could do as well. So the more powerful our men are as a bonus in that regard. Train them and make them ready for the big leagues that they would be joining soon." "Right. What has happened to your end, Byleth?" After being done with his talks with Alexander, Seal then turned towards his maid, who only looked down on the report that she created for this meeting. "Everything is doing well. The various magic circles and barriers is currently being implemented much faster than anticipated. With it being projected to be completed in a few more months' time, the new barracks and fortresses that are being made in the edge and middle areas of our territories is currently being built as expected. But still, it would take about a year and a few months before they are all built and installed all the defensive measure that we are trying to build," she finished, with her handing the various reports and papers about the project that she was handed over to, which Seal only nodded at. Seal, who heard of her short report and then read the long report, could only be silently impressed with her being able to condense it all down to such few words, while also being able to write the report in quite the detail that even impressed himself. Finished reading the reports, Seal then stacked the papers to his side before presenting a report paper for the duo to see. "With all that out of the way, what do you think of her? As a new saint?" With his words, the duo only stared silently at the girl that they have heard so much about, and even witnessed her skills in battles and spars as well, and to their own assessment, she is quite the talented individual on the same scale as some of the best that the church has on hand right now. "I think Master just wants to create a harem of beautiful women. PFFTT. Ha 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 ha." Byleth answered with her most honestly impression of what her precious master was doing right now, since after all, unlike her master, she does notice the various women that takes interest in him, which has caused her no end of headaches when he merely ignores them or doesn't even notice said affection altogether. In truth, most of the people that actually followed Seal on his pilgrimage across the supernatural and natural worlds, are does that fell in love with him, while the minority are does that just wanted to acquire something out of him, be it power, wealth or connection. But unfortunately for them though, he does notice does and just decided to let them be and doesn't give anything said individuals, causing majority of them to leave because they couldn't acquire anything, while does that only stayed simply because of how much they have spent to acquire his favor, with HTEM continuing to this day because of the hope of promise that they could anything out of him. The amount of times that she needed to clean up after him is numerous, with her being sure that she has properly killed more than 50% of the ones that wanted to take some form of revenge for the little he gave back to them. And just a small percentage of them are women, and even then, she was sure that does women have some sort of feelings for her precious master as well, with them just being a sunere about it and not deciding to say anything. It's why, right now, even she was getting annoyed at how many women that her master has currently wrapped around his fingers without even doing anything to acquire them in the first place. But still though, master, there truly are quite the number of women that desired your hand in marriage. When would you be marrying? It's something that Her Excellency Gabriel has also thought of as well, Byleth continued, very much interested on her master's choice on the matter of marriage, since after all, she could be one of his choices. "I will get married when I want to, and with this war happening, then I will not get married in this sort of conditions," Seal monotonely answered, already done with such questions being thrown at him, since after all, it is a highly debated question that all Church and Heaven members wants to know. Alexander, who has already getting used to this banter, couldn't help but just smile at the current state of the Church and Heaven itself, since after all, before Seal took over and God was still in his sleep, after Yahweh's return, Heaven revealed lied about Yahweh being forced to a coma-like state because of the damage that he sustained in the Great War. Everything was in a stasis-like state, with it also being slowly but surely weakening and dying over time. With the church higher-ups becoming slowly being replaced by more corrupt and incompetent leaders over the years. Of course there are some rare instances that some leader was actually a good leader and individual, but their work is quickly overrun by the numerous corrupt priests and cardinals that is either around them or appears after them. But after the appearance of Seal and the reappearance of God, did everything change? At first he too also hated Seal, not because out of jealousy, but because of him spending the church resources despite the church's dwindling resources that is usually spent on training, missions and maintenances of barracks and weaponry. It only stopped when he met with him directly, with the main cause of it being his holy light that held no impurity itself. It was the thing that caused him to believe in him, and become his follower and loyal believer, and ever since then, he has supported him and created numerous support groups that are loyal to him, since the day that he would serve the church as nay, and so, he missioned himself that he needed create factions that are loyal to him, but aren't connected to himself. But of course, all of that was negated when God appeared once more in the church and commanded that Seal would be the new pope and the one in charge of the church itself, with him even revealing of his new status as the new resurrection of Jesus Christ. A lie that Yahweh created to not cause confusion and focused their worship towards Seal. With that, it was easy for many exorcists and priests to transition to his rulership, something that Alexander appreciated since after all, before all of that was revealed, he has essentially successfully recruited all that is indifferent towards the boy or have at least some positive outlook towards him, but still, it was still by far the minority of the church personnel. But with God itself revealing and ordering them, majority of the church personnel easily accepted him as their leader, and the resurrected Jesus Christ, with them even categorizing why he is so popular in heaven was because of this status of resurrection that they choose to hide to them until he is ready. And so, the church, heaven started to rise back up to their prime ever since the duo has returned to their place in the pantheon, with it now being well regarded as being one of the top 5 strongest pantheons out there, despite just having the status of a faction itself, completely surpassing and outpacing both the Fallen and Devil faction respectively in the rankings as a result of the changes that they have done. And for the first time in a long time, their presences was felt throughout the supernatural world, especially in the European side of the world itself, with them truly being felt like they are slowly reaching back to their prime once again. No matter what. I truly do feel like you are the hope of our beloved faction. I shall follow you to the end of my time, Alexander thought, vowing to protect the young ruler from all potential threats that he might be facing in the future. In the another dimension itself that was called the underworld, in the place that was located and territoried ruled by the fallen angels with the faction name of Grigori, led by the Governor-General Azazel. It was a faction that was ruled by excessive sin itself, more so than the devils themselves when it first came about, but as time went on and the more and more established they became, they too was engulfed in enough order that would allow them to create a massive and powerful army in its own right, allowing them to fight off numerous enemies like angels, devils, grim reapers and even some gods as well. And so right now, with the advancement of heaven itself, the current state of affairs in heaven was frantic to say the least, with numerous fallen responding to this by either going back to their old roots and going back to debauchery and sin, or some simply going back to train even harder to acquire some sort of advantage against heaven itself, their sworn enemy and nemesis. But as of right now, the leader and strongest of the fallen angels, only stood in the middle of his large room in complete silence, with his wings that is as dark as the starless night sky itself being numbered 14 in total. A sign that he too has also risen through the ranks and became a super fallen angel himself, or in the words of his own race evolutionary stage, staff officer, meaning he is now currently and undoubtedly the strongest of the fallen angel race, with only one more stage before he equals the power of his dear old dad. But he is confused on a single fact though, how? He was confused on how he did it. In truth, he wasn't doing anything at all in this very moment in where his evolution happened. Sure he does train to become stronger when he heard news of his father somehow getting back commands of heaven, and the new rising star, Seal Tempest has taken control of the church. It was a moment in the history of heaven itself that Azazel wake up from his sin-filled life and then ordered every last one of his army to train and try to awaken to a higher rank in their evolutionary line itself, something that of course caused some discord within his ranks, but he didn't really care and just continued forth simply because of how important it truly is to acquire a higher rank so that they wouldn't be eliminated in the upcoming war. And so, when he was just doing some meditation to ready his mind for a more commander-like state, his status changed right there and then, and with that, he evolved into the next stage of his evolutionary line. Something that confused even his genius self, and when he would ponder into it further, a knock was heard in the room, causing Azazel to look at the door of his room. "Who is it?" "It's me, father. Can I come in?" Hearing the voice of his beloved son, Azazel's face lit up and then let out a smile. "Sure, Dino. Come in." With that, the door of his room then opened up, causing him to see his beloved son's appearance. Dino has the appearance of a youthful man that could be described as beautiful if it weren't for the rings under his eyes and his sleepy mannerisms. He has messy purple-silver hair and dull gray-blue eyes, as well as 3 pairs of black feathered wings that he normally keeps hidden, with him wearing a purple-pink shirt, white pauldrons, and a green cloak. He can usually be seen wearing his twin swords sheathed around his waist. Dino, said to be the star of the fallen angel race, with him rising through the ranks of power, technique, experience and evolutionary line in an extremely fast pace compared to his kind, with him even being touted as being one of the strongest in the Bible pantheon, despite how many millions of fallen and devils there are as well. With that, Azazel then hid his wings from his son, not because he didn't want him to learn of his evolution, but because he didn't want others to see his newly evolved state, not wanting word to get out of rumors of his evolution to leak. Since if that did happen, then the devil faction would certainly do something about it, since his strength is not about his power, but his intellect and wit. If they saw him evolved and become a super fallen angel, they would certainly try to eliminate him, or harm his faction as much as possible before the angels could intervene. Dino, who saw his father's wings, didn't bring it up, and just plop himself into the couch before reporting why he was here in the first place. "Right, Dad, the others wants me to call you since the war council is starting." Saying that, Azazel then took his ancient clothes that he used for battle, and then wore them before turning towards Dino. "And what about you? Would you be joining us?" "Huh? No, that isn't my strong point. I just let others do the thinking, and I would do the easy part," he lazily answered, truly didn't want to be a part of said meeting despite being his responsibility, something that Azazel smirks and leaves his be, since he doesn't really cost any sort of trouble at all. All right. But still, how was that kid? Hearing his father's ambiguous words, he shrugs. "Kid? Who are you talking about anyway? Seal Tempest, how is he, and how strong is he?" Now hearing who the child that he was talking was, now Dino looked serious for the first time since he entered the room, and seriously with full certainty in his voice. Strong. Hella strong. That was the only thing that Azazel needed to hear just to know how dangerous of a threat that Seal Tempest has become over the months of his journey across the world. At first he merely ignored the boy, since after all, by that point he didn't think he would be a strong player in the supernatural world when he first heard of his name. But now that he became the head of the church, his abilities to lead and manage became very clear in the short span he ray as the new head of the church, with him being able to turn the weak human army of old into a formidable army that has even repelled the forces of gods and demons far more easier and effective compared to before. It was to the point that right now, going and trying to invade the territories of the church, heaven would be like a suicide mission simply because of how defended it truly was, with some of the more brave, steady ones even trying to avoid their territory as much as possible, not wanting to be either captured or killed. In terms of power, heaven still hasn't reclaimed their former glory days, with them having numerous archangels with numerous special abilities that they acquired from the library itself. But in terms of an army though, the current heaven right now could be said to be better equipped, since even the lowest rank file soldier is still vastly more powerful and skilled warrior compared to before. And it was something that the others failed to realize. To the ones that are still alive when they betrayed heaven, they still mostly saw heaven as a faction that is trying to acquire back their former glory days. Even if the news of Yahweh's return is true, that still wouldn't be enough to cause the full return of heaven back to their prime, since after all, in terms of archangel-class angels, there are no less than 20 of them in total, or even 15. Because of this thinking, they forgot to account for the rank and file soldier that heaven currently has. Despite their army being more comprised of humans, that in itself wouldn't be seen as a weakness simply because of how skilled and masterful of a warrior said human now is, with many of them even having the potential to awaken into their enlightened stage, a stage of evolution that would even make the supernatural world tremble in fear if they were to realize such an army was formed right under their noses. And when they figured it all out, what Seal Tempest of Heaven is doing right now. They might not even realize it before it's too late, and so, Azazel then went towards the meeting hall of the Grigori faction, ready to lead his race into peace and culture, so that they may not go extinct with Seal now calling the shots.